Three, two, one. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, if I lived in a world where I had a relatively long life and a meaningless death, I don't think I'd do much. I'd probably be lulled into a false sense of security that I had time, and what would happen is procrastination nation. There would be no sense of urgency to do good things. I wouldn't be thinking about other people and the rest of society. I probably wouldn't give a shit about the environment because my life is meaningless. And what happens in this very nihilistic society is that people become selfish, people become lazy, and ultimately, when you compare these two worlds, because it's a comparison of worlds, the quality of life and the meaning ascribed to that is ultimately less compared to that on the comparative. Let's discuss the comparative. What does it mean or what does it look like to have a relatively short life but something that is meaningful? I think a short life can be something, I don't know, in the teens, maybe, like just to be able to go with their definition. Maybe it's 30, 25. Our closing seem to have a problem with it. I'm very much also willing to say that that could be in the teens. I don't think the semantics of that matter too much, but like relative to an average human life of like 70 years, something below 30 in the 20s and the teens would be all right. What exactly does it mean to have a meaningful life? And that's quite interesting. I think a meaningful life can be segmented in three particular ways. Firstly, a meaningful life for you as the individual in connection to the death. Because I think a meaningful death, even if you don't know when you're gonna die or how you're going to die or what the meaning of that is going to be, definitely has an individual effect on you. Because over time, you're gonna start like noticing and seeing that, people die kind of young and you only have a limited amount of time to be able to do things, which is why, in order for a meaningful life to actually happen, beginning with the end in mind or looking at the meaningful death of those people, in and of itself become an incentive structure to actually do things. What does a meaningful death look like? I think it's something that an individual can define themselves. So, for instance, if you're relatively young and you develop like a fatal chronic disease or a cancer that's gonna kill you when you're young, you're probably going to ascribe some sort of meaning to that while you're alive, which actualizes that death being meaningful. Meaning you won't be too negative, you won't be too pessimistic, you won't fall into chronic anxiety, depression because of that self-fulfilling nihilism, which happens on side proposition. You're probably going to be able to make the best out of those circumstances. And this extends outside being sick, right? Like, even if you understand that you only have a couple of years left because your father, your father's father, all died at that particular time, similar to like the olden days where people only lived until like 30, that was considered old already. You're probably going to be able to make some sort of action because on both sides of the house, people are still going to have interests. People will want to be able to start a family. People would want to be able to have a good career. And here's the kicker. This is flipping what they said about legacy and succession planning. On their side, if you give no meaning to your particular death, then what incentive would parents have to be able to set up the life for their children in a relatively good and comfortable way if they believe that their life has no fucking meaning and they also believe that the life of other people as a consequence probably wouldn't have meaning? You don't have a sense of legacy and succession, which rob your ability to be able to take care of your family and other people you care about. The second thing is from the lens of society. Meaning, on our side, even if your life sucks shit and it's absolutely bad, but people post-mortem say like, yo, you're a cool guy, like what they said, Heath Ledger, or oh, this person did something cool, like Kobe, or think about anyone cool who died, who we celebrate for all of the great things. that in and of itself gives those people who are alive and the family of the dead an incentive structure to continue being hopeful. Because your life, even if it's short, doesn't just end with that. There's a certain sense of indirect continuity that actually give that meaning. Because I know that when I die, those who love me will think something of me, or society will judge me. And as a consequence, that becomes an incentive structure for me to not be lazy, or for me to not embarrass myself, or make my life worse than it actually is. But before I proceed, go, POI.
Well, please remember that this debate requires a person to choose wherein they will derive the greatest purpose in life. These two ideas that the PMOLO wants to allude to are very symmetrical.
On both sides, people have free will and choice. But what I'm saying is that if your life is, or if your death is going to be something meaningless, then there's a higher likelihood, because when you're alive, knowing that over time, you probably won't do much. And I understand, right? We don't know when we're gonna die. We don't have a crystal ball to tell us how we're going to die. But at least in terms of the narrative, because this is a world reset, so we have to compare how these people would think, how these people look at legacy. And on side proposition, you probably have little to no legacy, little to no incentive structure to think about great things like the environment, or thinking about curing cancer, or doing other things which are more selfless and directed towards the things you care about. What is the impact you exclusively get on our side, even if life is particularly shorter, but something more meaningful? You get a rally point for people to be able to decide and not solely think about themselves. Because on their comparative, sure, your life is long, but it's meaningless to you, for the people around you, and for society. So what incentive do those people have to actually do anything? Like what I mentioned in my pre-oration, it's more likely that people would succumb to nihilism, selfishness, and hedonism, probably end up being lazy, and have no incentive structure to think outside themselves. For all of these reasons, we are very proud to stand on side negative.